Hey guys, this is Jay, and we are less than 20 days away from the release of PSVR, so I thought I'd come and give you guys my top 5 most anticipated PSVR titles, and in the interest of time, I'm going to jump right into it. Here is number 5, Loading Human. And the reason that I'm so excited about Loading Human is because Loading Human is the first true VR game. When you look at all of the games for the Vive, they're all pretty much just tech demos. They're 15 minutes at a time. The story games are like 45 minutes to an hour, and none of them are really what you would consider full games. And then when you look at the games for the Oculus, they're mostly played with the Xbox One controller because Oculus Touch hasn't even been released yet. And when you look at the other PSVR games, a lot of them are played with the DualShock 4, which means that they're not motion control games, which means they're not true VR. Loading Human is a true VR game, but it's also a true game. There's a full story, it's got lots of content, and the developers have gone out of their way to try and make this the most real feeling game out there. From, like, for example, if you want to unlock a chest in this game, you reach out and grab the key, you put the key into the lock, you turn your hand to turn the key, then you lift the chest open, you look inside, you see what's in there, you reach in and you take whatever you want out, as opposed to hitting a series of buttons to select the key, select use, and then selecting the items you want from a menu that pops up after you open the chest. Those kinds of things are what these developers are hoping will take the immersion to a whole new level. And I hope they're right, because that is really what VR is all about. It's all about making your natural movements be the majority of the controls. The fewer buttons you have to press in a VR game, the better it will be. But beyond that, they're also taking the interactions you have with NPCs to a whole new level. For example, you have a girlfriend in this game. There's a scene where the girl is trapped inside a fire. Now, in a regular game, what you would do is you would go find the fire extinguisher and you would hit X to take it. Then you would use R2 to fire it, and you would clear a path from the exit to your girlfriend by spraying the fire with it. You would then walk over to the girlfriend, push X, she would give you some kind of response to let you know that the button press was registered, and then she would follow your character out of the fire at an extraordinarily aggravatingly slow pace. If the AI is smart enough not to walk directly into the fire and die, forcing you to do it all again. But in this game, you do pretty much the same thing, except entirely different. In this game, you walk over to the fire extinguisher and you reach out and grab it. Then you clear the space from the exit to your girlfriend. And then when you get to her, you physically reach out and grab her hand with the motion controller, and then you walk her back out through the flames. And that is taking the interaction you have with an NPC to a whole new level, and they're trying to create an actual emotional connection to the NPC by using things like having them look you in the eye when they're talking to you, having them physically interact with you, having them hug you and hold your hand, and things like that. And it's supposed to feel a lot less like playing a character in a video game and a whole lot more like being a character in a story. And for me, I'm someone who can't stand stories in video games. To me, a cutscene is just something I have to skip to get back to gameplay. And I have never once felt any sort of emotional response when an NPC dies in a game. It just doesn't bother me. I don't know. I just don't care about them or the story. I just want good gameplay. And I'm hoping that Loading Human will change that, because I'm hoping that what Loading Human is doing will actually be effective at drawing me into the game like I've never been drawn into it before. And number 4 is Eagle Flight, and I have to eat a little bit of crow on this one. I kind of have to eat my words here, because I had an interaction with somebody on Reddit a while back. Somebody had written their list of games they're looking forward to, and someone else had responded, "What about Eagle Flight?" To which I responded, "Eagle Flight looks like it took them about 10 minutes to bake." And he wrote back to me, "Ouch." And it caught me off guard. Like, why would you just say ouch? So I started looking through his history and was able to deduce the fact that he was an actual developer of Eagle Flight. And so obviously I felt kind of bad for insulting his work and insinuating that something that he's undoubtedly spent a lot of time on only took him 10 minutes to make. But like I said, I'm eating crow now. This is my penance, because I now think Eagle Flight looks like one of the most fun games in a long time. Not even just for VR, just in general. And the reason it's still number 4 on my list instead of a lot higher is because of the setting. I mean, it looks like Zootopia Flight Simulator, and that's just not something that's going to appeal to me very much. I think it's really silly. But when I get past that, this becomes the flight simulator that I have wanted for so long. Because most flight simulators, when you play them, they all take place in open space. Like, for example, a couple 100 feet above the earth, like in War Thunder, or even just open space out in the middle of space, like Eve Valkyrie, where there's no obstacles, there's no environment. It's just, all you're doing is trying to get behind your opponent so you can missile lock. And to me, that's kind of lame. I know it's more realistic, okay, fine, but it's boring. And ever since I saw Star Wars, I have wanted the kind of flight simulator that, Shadows of the Empire was back in the day, where you can fly through the legs of the AT-AT, and you can dodge the asteroids, and you can make the trench run, and you can do all these things, it just right up against the environment. And that kind of stuff looks so much fun to me. And when I look at Eagle Flight, if I think of it like, instead of dodging asteroids, you're dodging trees. Instead of making a trench run, you're flying up the middle of the Eiffel Tower. Instead of flying through a broken down Star Destroyer, you're flying through a sewer pipe or an old broken building. When I think about it like that, Eagle Flight becomes the flight simulator that I've been waiting for so long for, and I can't wait to play it. I think it looks like a ton of fun. I wish that they had gone with a different setting, just a different overall environment, but I'm willing to look past it if the gameplay is as good as I think it's going to be. And number 3 is World War Toons. And World War Toons is a really important game in my opinion, because when I was first starting to hear about VR, I wasn't really that excited about it. My favorite game at the time was Call of Duty, and I really wanted, I thought Call of Duty in VR, that would be amazing, but everybody told me that'll never work. You can't do Call of Duty in VR because motion sickness and it's too fast-paced and all this stuff. And so I just kind of forgot about VR and didn't care for like a year until I started looking into it again and found another game that is later on this list, and World War Toons. And World War Toons is actually from the developers of Call of Duty. The developers who made World War Toons are guys who worked on games like Modern Warfare 2, back in the heyday of Call of Duty, back when it was really good. And the game itself, the gameplay looks like Call of Duty. Yes, it's a cartoon. Yes, it's kind of silly. And yes, it's got a goofy sense of humor, which is either good or bad. It depends on your taste. But the gameplay itself is very Call of Duty. It's very fast-paced. It's an arena shooter. And it's built around fun. And I am really looking forward to it, not just because it looks fun, but because of what it could mean for the future of VR gaming. Because if World War Toons works, which it sounds like it will, if there's not a bunch of people throwing up all over their shoes when they play it, which they're, according to their testing, they're testing really well when it comes to VR sickness. It not only stands as 100% proof that it can be done, but it also lays out the blueprint with how to do it. So studios like Treyarch and Infinity Ward and DICE don't have to do any research. All they have to do is implement what has already been shown to work in World War Toons. So, even if this game doesn't interest you at all, even if you don't like the cartoon art style or anything like that, I really suggest that you go ahead and get it, because A, it's 100% free, so you have nothing to lose, and B, the more people pick this game up and play it and and give it high ratings, the more first-person arena shooters will start being on the radar of these other major studios, and we might be able to get the next Battlefield in VR. We might be able to get the next Call of Duty in VR, or something like that, or a legitimate Battlefront instead of just an X-Wing mission. And it really could be a very important game for the future of first-person shooters. And number 2 on the list is Farpoint, and Farpoint would be number 1 if I was actually more interested in Farpoint itself, but I'm really not. I think Farpoint itself looks like a very boring, generic, different shades of brown kind of shooter that really is not a very exciting game at all. But let's be honest, Farpoint isn't about Farpoint. Farpoint is about the aim controller. And that is a very important aspect of gaming. I think that the aim controller is going to be huge in gaming moving forward. And, Farpoint, because of the aim controller, would be the first game to do this, except for Onward, so thanks a lot, Vive. But for the first game in PSVR, the aim controller gives you the ability to have the free roaming movement of an analog stick with the dynamic aiming of a motion controller. So that really is what I have been waiting for. Like, when I started looking at first-person shooters in VR and I was seeing things like London Heist and Until Dawn, Rush of Blood, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, it's just going to be rail shooters? I'm not excited about that at all. Then you look at the Move controller, there's no joystick on it, there's no thumbstick on it. So it's like, you have your motion controllers have no way of doing artificial movement unless you just want to do like push this button to move forward and then steer with your head. But Farpoint changes all that. The aim controller changes all of that. And I'm really looking forward to getting multiplayer games that use the aim controller, not just because I think it's the next step in first-person shooters, but also because I think esports would be really awesome if we went away from a group of guys staring at a screen holding a controller to a group of guys standing on a platform with VR headsets on and aim controllers in their hands. That would be so much more fun than watching Call of Duty, in my opinion. And I think that when we look back on the initial launch of PSVR, we're going to look at Farpoint and say that may not have been the most fun game in the world, but it was the most influential to the future of gaming, especially in first-person shooters. And my number 1 game has got to be Rigs. And, if you're looking up lists of top 5 most anticipated VR games, you probably already know about Rigs. So I'm going to just avoid talking about why I'm excited about Rigs, and rather than that, I'm just going to talk about what's included in Rigs, because the biggest complaint about VR games is that there's low content. A lot, like Batman is only 2 hours long and things like that. And so Rigs is not that. Rigs has a ton of content. If you put the content in Rigs up against any of the major shooters like Overwatch or Call of Duty or Battlefield or anything like that, it will hold its own when it comes to content. So let's just go down the list. It's got 24 rigs, which is more than Overwatch has heroes. It's got 4 maps, but before you start saying only 4 maps, each map actually changes based on the game mode you're playing. So what it has is 4 stadiums with a different layout for each stadium depending on the game mode you're playing. And considering we know for a fact there are 3 game modes and there is 1 more game mode that's been hinted at but not confirmed, that is at least 12, maybe 16 different variations of maps, which is as many or more than any other game that has been released in the last 10 years. Beyond that, it not only has a very in-depth multiplayer mode, much like any other shooter that you would expect nowadays, it also has an extensive single-player mode. It's got a single-player franchise mode like you would find in something like Madden or FIFA, where you can hire or fire AI pilots, you can buy new rigs, and you take over a team and you just try and build that team into the dynasty that you want it to be and compete for the World Cup of the Rigs Mechanized Combat League. On top of that, however, if online or online competitive multiplayer isn't really your thing, but you want to be able to play with your friends anyway, the franchise mode is fully playable as a co-op mode online. And if just playing random games against random people online isn't really your thing, you can actually start your own league because the franchise mode is also available in a competitive sense. So you can get your friends together and maybe some other people that you meet online together. Each of you controls a team and you play actual meaningful matches against each other, working towards a championship in your very own league that you created. It's everything that I've wanted in a competitive shooter since I started playing Call of Duty and started getting into the esports scene a little bit, watching the World League. I'm really excited about this game. I could go on for an hour about it, but this video is already pretty long, so I'm going to go ahead and stop talking now. Just be sure to do some research, look into these games yourself. Don't take my word for it. Make up your own mind. And thanks for listening and watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye.